Hola, soy Jasper Romo. El podcast que verán a continuación fue generado con inteligencia artificial. Y bueno, la intro de el podcast de Mi Sangre Mi Felicidad era un video que terminé convirtiendo en audio. Esto es un audio y no sé por qué siento que debo de ser un poco más formal. Entonces el podcast es generado con inteligencia artificial y yo lo traduje y subtitulé, además de recortar algunas partes. Porque bueno, la inteligencia artificial es más inteligente que nosotros, pero no es perfecta y hay partes en las que había algunos fallos, además de que hubo una parte en la que técnicamente estaba contando el final de la historia. Sin embargo, habla sobre el Hotel Alec. Lo más probable es que se spoileen un poco, eso lo dejo como una advertencia pequeña. Y bueno, tiendo a decir que mis historias no son buenas, pero editando este podcast me di cuenta de que si es una de las historias que yo leería con emoción. Puede sonar algo egocéntrico, lo que sí es que el Hotel Alec tuvo mucho apoyo de recién que lo publiqué en plataformas. Hubo algunos lectores que llegaron a comparármelo con cierto libro que no voy a mencionar para que no se malinterprete, pero a pesar de que yo ya veo ese libro algo diferente, debido a que ya veo a su autor algo diferente, he de admitir que no siento que el Hotel Alec esté a nivel de este libro, porque este libro es una joyita de verdad. De todas maneras, gracias a quienes llegaron a compararlo con ese libro. El Hotel Alec es el libro que hasta ahora ha tenido más apoyo. Agradezco de verdad. No sé si en algún momento les llegue a agradecer tanto a quienes consumieron a El Hotel Alec, pero gracias. Y nada, continuamos con el podcast. Así todos mis libros pueden leerlos en Wattpad e Inkit. Y les recuerdo que acabo de estrenar Son of Lord.
Welcome back, everybody. Today we're going to be doing a deep dive on El Hotel Alec.
Ooh, okay.
Have you had a chance to read it yet?
I have, yes.
Okay, great. So I found this one pretty interesting. On the surface, it looks like a pretty simple, romance novel.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a lot more going on.
Yeah, definitely.
And it's pretty dark in parts.
There's some themes that you don't often see explored in romance.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's what makes this one so interesting.
So I guess let's just jump right in and start talking about it. So the story takes place in this fancy hotel in Ireland. It's called the Hotel Alec. And our main character is Tobias Winston.
Right.
And Tobias, he's a young guy who works at the hotel. He's just trying to, make a living.
Mm-hmm.
And then one day, the Irish president, William Ellington, arrives at the hotel. And, things get pretty crazy from there.
Yeah, that's where everything changes for Tobias.
Yeah, so Tobias is assigned to be President Ellington's personal attendant, which, sounds like a pretty sweet gig, right?
I mean, yeah, you'd think so, right?
You get to, hang out with the president, get all this special treatment. But it quickly becomes clear that there's a lot more to this job than meets the eye.
Yeah, it's not all it's cracked up to be.
So right away, there's this power imbalance between Tobias and President Ellington.
Right, because, you've got this young employee, and then you have the president of the country.
Exactly.
Gee.
And Ellington, he's a very, very demanding, very controlling guy. He's used to getting his own way.
Mm-hmm.
And so he starts to exert this power over Tobias.
Yeah, and it starts to get a little bit weird.
Yeah, a little creepy for sure.
Like there are these punishments that Ellington uses.
Right, like he'll spank Tobias or speak to him really harshly.
Yeah, and then there's the forced intimacy.
Yeah.
Which is definitely crossing a line.
Yeah, it gets really dark.
But at the same time, Tobias is getting all these perks.
Right, he gets a big raise and all this special treatment.
Yeah, so it's like he's being both rewarded and punished.
Exactly, and I think that's what makes Tobias's character so interesting. He's caught in this really difficult situation.
Yeah, he's clearly drawn to Ellington, but he's also uncomfortable with the way he's being treated.
Right, so it's like this constant push and pull between his desire for Ellington and his own sense of self-respect.
And I think that's something a lot of people can relate to, that feeling of being trapped in a situation that's both good and bad.
Yeah, for sure. And then on top of all that, we find out that President Ellington is not who he seems.
Oh yeah, that's a big twist.
So it turns out that Ellington is trapped in this web of political manipulation.
He's being forced to do things he doesn't want to do.
Right. He's being controlled by these powerful people behind the scenes.
And one of the biggest things they're forcing him to do is maintain this fake relationship with a woman named Sarah.
Yeah, and that's a whole other layer of messed upness.
Right, because here's Tobias falling for this guy who's already in a relationship.
And it's not just any relationship, it's this completely fabricated relationship that's all for show.
Yeah, and we find out that Sarah and Ellington actually have a son together, a little boy named Ezra.
Oh, wow.
And get this, Ezra was conceived through a sperm donation scheme that Ellington's team orchestrated.
What? So they basically tricked him into having a child with this woman.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy.
So not only is Ellington trapped in this fake relationship, he's also a father without even knowing it.
And Tobias, he stumbles upon all of these secrets by accident.
Oh man, can you imagine?
He must have felt so betrayed and confused.
Yeah, like everything he thought he knew about Ellington was a lie.
It really throws their whole relationship into question.
So what does Tobias do? Does he confront Ellington about all of this? Does he walk away?
Well, that's what we're going to talk about in the next part of our deep dive.
All right, so make sure you tune in next time to find out what happens next.
It's about to get even more intense.
Okay, so last time we left off with President Ellington kind of in a really bad spot.
Yeah, things weren't looking too good for him.
Yeah, not to mention he just kidnapped his son.
Yeah, that was a pretty shocking move.
So he basically just takes off with Ezra and Tobias.
Right. They're trying to escape all the craziness.
It's like they're running away from all their problems.
Which, I mean, I kind of get it.
Yeah, I mean, I can't imagine what kind of pressure Ellington was under.
Right, he was tracked in this whole political game.
And then there's Tobias, he's caught in the middle of all this.
He's fallen for this guy who's basically a fugitive now.
Yeah, and they're on the run with a kidnapped child.
It's a lot to process.
So what happens once they get to England?
Well, things start to settle down a bit.
Really?
Yeah, William, he's finally free from all the political stuff.
So he's not the president anymore?
Nope, he's just William now.
Huh. Interesting.
But it's not all sunshine and roses.
Of course not.
They still have to deal with the fallout from everything that happened.
Right. They can't just pretend it never happened.
Exactly. They have to find a way to move on with their lives.
And what about William?
He's trying to figure out his new identity,
Yeah, he's not a president anymore. He's just a regular guy.
Right, and that's a big adjustment for him.
It must be weird going from being so powerful to just being like everyone else.
Yeah, I bet it's a real struggle.
So they're trying to make this new life for themselves. And what about Sarah?
Oh, yeah. What happened to her after they left Ireland?
Did they ever tell her that they were leaving?
Well, William decides to go back and talk to her.
Really?
Yeah, he wants to try and reason with her.
To, get custody of Ezra.
Exactly. He wants to be free from his political handlers.
So he goes back to Ireland to confront Sarah?
It doesn't go well.
What happens?
They get into a huge fight,
Oh, no.
and in a moment of rage, William accidentally kills Sarah.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, it's a really dark turn of events.
But does anyone find out?
Nope, William's team, they cover it all up.
They make it look like a suicide.
Exactly. But this time it comes at a much higher cost.
Yeah, they've taken a human life.
And that's something they're going to have to live with.
So what happens next? Do they just go on with their lives like nothing happened?
I don't know. It's hard to understand.
But it still doesn't seem right.
It's definitely a complicated situation.
Yeah, there's no easy answers here.
And that's what makes this book so thought-provoking.
Wow. So much has happened in El Hotel, Alec. It's kind of hard to wrap my head around it.
It is a lot to take in, that's for sure.
I guess, the biggest thing that's sticking with me is how the story ends.
Yeah, it's not your typical happily ever after, is it? Is it really a happy ending when they're built on so much darkness?
It makes you think about, justice and privilege.
Mm-hmm. Are some people just above the law?
Which is a pretty unsettling thought.
It is. It definitely makes you question things.
So I guess the author's trying to make us think about those bigger issues.
Yeah, I think so. It's not just a simple love story.
It's more like a commentary on society and power.
And the complexities of human relationships.
Right. It's like they're saying love isn't always enough.
Yeah, sometimes love can be destructive.
Especially when it's mixed with power and secrets.
And lies. And manipulation.
Sounds like a recipe for disaster.
Pretty much.
Huh.
But even with all that, it's hard not to feel for Tobias and William.
Yeah. I mean, they are victims in a way, too.
Right. They're both trapped by circumstances.
And they make some really bad choices.
But they're also trying to find happiness.
Which is something we can all relate to.
I think that's what makes this book so compelling. Even though it's dark and disturbing.
It's also really human.
Yeah, it shows us the good and the bad.
And it makes us question what we would do in those situations.
Exactly. It's not about judging the characters. It's about understanding them.
And maybe even understanding ourselves a little better.
That's a great point. Well, I think that about wraps up our deep dive on El Hotel Alec.
It was definitely a wild ride.
If you haven't read it yet, I highly recommend checking it out. But be warned, it's not for the faint of heart.
Yeah, it's intense, but it's also really thought-provoking.
And it'll stay with you long after you finish reading it.
All right, thanks for joining us, everyone.
Until next time.